and a warm welcome to you all. My name is Dawn Lane, and I am the Program Manager for the Massy Learning Institute. Today, we're going to talk about leadership insights from a young executive. And I'm thinking that throughout all of our technical difficulties today, we probably would have learned a few things because we are in the age of technology, and this is probably one of his fortes. Anyhow, there's much to learn from our young leaders. We know Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, David Karp, the founder of Tumblr, Blake Ross, not by name maybe, but certainly by his work. He's the creator of Mozilla Firefox. And these young leaders show us that their young age did not stop them from leading and leading differently. Our young leaders serve as role models for all emerging leaders of today and tomorrow. They have the ability to shape our world and grow both personally and professionally. Even if you have to ever read, there's a book called Leading Without a Title by Robin Sharma. It talks about the new model of leadership, and it's all about leading without a title. And what does that mean? It means that our young people and our young leaders know that while titles and positions matter, leading without titles simply means that any business that really wants to win in times of dramatic disruption needs to build the leadership capability of every employee at every level. So today, our presenter will share his story of his journey through moving from a very young age through the organization and what that meant for him. So listen carefully, and as always, pop your questions in the question and answer box, which will be open shortly as we go along. And we will make sure that Jared has some time to answer your questions and spend that time with you. So Jared started his journey with us in 2006 at the then BS&T group. He progressed through various roles, starting as a management trainee and penultimately into the role of commercial director at Massy Stores Barbados Limited. He departed the group briefly to take up the role of Chief Operating Officer at a leading Indigenous financial institution. I think he missed Massy a little bit because he rejoined the group as the current Vice President and CEO at Massy Distribution in April this year, and prides himself on being detail-oriented, highly focused on strategy execution, creating a culture of performance, and he's very people-focused. We are so happy to have you back, Jared. Welcome.
Thank you, Dawn. Just to say, I'm not sure I'm worthy of the comparison to Mark Zuckerberg and the like, but I appreciate the comparison nonetheless. Again, morning everybody, and again, as Dawn mentioned, apologies for the technical difficulties we experienced. We thank you that you stayed with us. I know your time is precious, so we appreciate you taking the time to still stay through the course. All right, so what I wanted to start off today by saying is my hope for today's session is I'm not necessarily here to say that I have the secret sauce or the answer to what leadership is. I think leadership is a very personal journey for a good few of us, for all of us, I should probably say. And it's unique in how it manifests in each of us based on personalities or upbringing or affinities. So I'm not here to say that this is the way leadership should be done. What I'm here to share is I've been the beneficiary of, I would say, a good few amazing mentors. I've been fortunate to work with some of the most senior people in Massy and in other organizations, and they have shared freely with their experience, both in letting me be in the room when they had certain conversations, as well as being very purposeful in imparting their experience on me and sharing it with me. And I'm acutely aware that that opportunity doesn't necessarily happen for everyone. So today really is my hope and an intention and my way of saying, you know what, I want to share with you what I've learned from these great leaders. And none of these lessons are mine, but I have made them mine and how I manifest in my leadership. And I will say the same to you. Don't take what I say wholesale and try to implement it and say, well, this is how you do this. Take it, embrace it, spend some time with it, recognize who you are as a person, what is authentically you, and see how you can make it manifest in what is best for you as you go on your leadership journey. So, with that said, I wanted to start the conversation with a basic question. What is leadership? What is this thing that we're talking about and that we hear so often about? You know, is it characteristics? Is it a model? Is it skills? Is it traits? You know, they have to be a financial wizard. You have to have 1,000 years of experience. You know, if you do a search for leadership or leadership books or leadership training, there's so many different things out there that really could be confusing, if I'm honest. And I think if you're honest with yourselves, there's sometimes seemingly opposing views on certain things. And what I want to share with you today, and for the purpose of our conversation today, is none of these are wrong. You know, I think there's going to be something that resonates with you in your own personal leadership journey at some point in time based on where you are in your journey. So based on what is your next hurdle or obstacle as you are going through your progression, some of these things are going to resonate with you differently and be meaningful to you at that point in time. So none of them are wrong. It's not to say this thing over that thing. They all have their place based on where you are in your progression. So with that being said, what I'd like to say is, as an overarching point, leadership, to my mind, is really about impact. And Sheryl Sandberg, who's the CEO of Facebook, really has a nice quote which I wanted to share. Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that impact lasts in your absence. And I want you to sit with that for a little bit. Leadership, to my mind, and for this conversation, at its essence, is about impact. And that impact is far-reaching. It is across spectrums. It's across different functions, different lenses. So that is around people, around your business or your departmental performance, around culture, around vision, around strategy. What I want to submit to you today for your consideration is that leadership at its core is about impact. And if you use that as kind of your base or your bedrock or your foundation, you will find that the different theories or material or books you read all kind of have that at its center. It's about how can you impact what you've been blessed to have responsibility for, making an impact. So on to my first insight I want to share with you, and they're in no particular order. There's not one that's more important than the other. They're not in a sequence. These are really things that I want to say. I'm not sure if everybody will have the opportunity to really hear these things in the way I've heard them, so I want to share them. And in some cases, they're things you've heard before, and I wanted to say, you know what? Yes, through my journey, I can say to you, these things are important. So it's not just an article or a book from somebody you probably never even met. I have gone through my own challenges, and these things are really important. So I want to kind of add credence to what you may or may not be reading in your own research. So communication. Leadership really is a currency of communication. If you think about a sports person, a cricketer, a batsman, a tennis player, a footballer, you know, a tennis player has a foreswing or forehand, backhand, a footballer has different shots, a cricketer has, a batsman or bowler. They have different things they impart in the execution of their role. And for us as leaders, communication is those things that we have to enact. So whether it be about culture, strategy, setting a vision, you know, having a one-on-one conversation, developing your team, I challenge you that it's going to be very difficult for you to actually do anything in those things in a meaningful and impactful way unless you have your communication skills down pat and developed in a way that is really meaningful and useful to the task at hand. And just like using the same sports person analogy, a footballer would train, a tennis player would train, a cricketer would train, whatever sport, into fishing, whatever it is, your thing. Those people that are at the pinnacle of their game, they spend hours and hours and thousands of hours and days and years really, really honing their craft, their particular skills. I've read things about Usain Bolt in his sprinting career that, he may spend a whole session just training on the start, the first maybe 10 meters of a 100-meter race. So just like those things, communication has different applications. That in our leadership development, we do need to figure out how do we build that skill in those particular facets. So a good one is building connections. When you lead a team, even though their team may be 3 people, maybe 30 people, you have, I offer to you, you have to have a real connection with each of your team members as best as possible. It's not really practical the larger the team grows, but without that effort to build connections in some way, I suggest you're going to struggle to really lead your team or have your team willing to be led by you. So without communication, how do you connect with the person? How do you make them feel like they're listened to? And you see here active listening further down in the slide. How do you create a safe space for them? Creating a safe space is an important point. Again, I can dig into it a little further, but how do you communicate to them that this is an environment that they're free to be themselves and to share their ideas? As a leader, we are all about growth and development and setting a vision for a responsibility. How does your team know where you want them to go? Do you have it in your head and have you not communicated it? And that's a sin that most people are very guilty of. We have these ideas in our head and we haven't communicated them either at all or in a way that the person who needs to understand it can really grasp it. Empathy. Again, a person won't recognize that this is a safe space or that you understand where they're coming from unless you can communicate that to them. So in any facet, and I challenge you, in any facet that you can think about in leadership, if you can't communicate in a meaningful and purposeful way, you're going to struggle with those different aspects. So again, leave you that note. Communication is a foundational skill that underpins any aspect of leadership that you're looking to develop. It really goes across all these spectrums. So the second insight that I want to share with you is the concept of extreme ownership. And the concept really states that as a leader in charge of a, again, department, a business, a division, a company, whatever your sphere of responsibility is, I suggest to you that you will unlock potential in yourself to lead and govern and grow that area of responsibility if you take on the notion that you are ultimately accountable for every single thing that happens in your business. And I force the point, and almost like a facetious way, everything is your fault. Regardless to how it happened, where it happened, who it happened to, or who did it, everything is your fault as a leader. And I'm not in a blame way, so not to say that you should be punished, or the case may be, but if you take the position that everything is your fault, quote unquote, your mind, I promise you, your mind will open to possibilities that it wouldn't normally if you take the position that, well, this person did it, so I couldn't control that. So will it be perfect? No. Will it solve every ill known to man? No. But when you accept that extreme ownership and that ultimate accountability, and that you own the problem, no matter where it is occurring in your business, you will find that you start to ask yourself questions. What could I have done differently? So and I'll use an example. Let's say you are a senior manager in a technology company and the receptionist gives poor service or forgets to log something that they should log. There may be 5 or 6 levels between that senior manager and receptionist. So the first question most people will probably ask themselves is, well, how is the senior manager at fault? Is he literally at fault or she literally at fault? Not necessarily. Excuse me. But if they take the perspective, I own everything that's happening in my business, that person can then start to ask questions. Well, was the person trained? Did they offer them training? Did they make sure they were trained, or they just assume that they had the skills necessary? Does the person know this was an expectation? Did they communicate that? Did they create an environment where not doing this or doing this was seen as okay? What part did I play in this conversation or in this reality or situation? So no, you're not there at the point in time it happens, so you can't control every interaction. But when you take on the ownership perspective, the extreme ownership perspective, you can ask yourself questions that leads you to a place that you probably wouldn't have gone if you just accepted, well, that person did this or this person did that, and that's the end of the story. So consider that, everything is your fault. And the reverse of that, and for those who may be challenged with that concept, again, going back to our definition, if leadership is about impact and there's something in your space that you refuse to accept that you can impact, and I'm going to ask you a very pointed and what may seem as a rough question. Why are you there if not to impact what's happening in your business? What's your purpose if you accept you can't do something about it? And that may be a little hard to swallow, but I'm being provocative on purpose, almost to force you to think about the question. If there's something happening that you're responsible for, and you accept that you're the leader, you're in charge of that, again, department, business, company, whatever the case may be, you have almost a fiduciary responsibility to do what you can to influence what's happening. Again, not that you're physically there to do the job of the person, but set the expectations, build the culture, build the controls if it's something that needs to not happen. Have conversations, make sure that what is expected is understood by everybody. Are people trained? Ensure that they're trained. When you take that position, you really are open to real possibilities that wouldn't normally be there. So again, leadership is impact. And when I say impact and ownership, this is across all spectrums. So this is not necessarily, it's not even necessarily, it's not a financial only conversation to say, well, hit the numbers or do this task or execute this project. You own everything. So engagement, the culture that exists, the type of environment, safety, development, training, you own everything that exists in your sphere. Again, that may not literally be true, but I promise you, you will have access to solutions if you accept it in your mind and start to ask questions. So if you were, let's say, a middle-level manager in an organization, so you may not have full authority to do something. But if you take the position, this is my responsibility, you may have a conversation with the HR department or your general manager or your manager that you may have not otherwise had because it wasn't your responsibility. So again, take on the burden. You've heard it saying leadership is an awesome burden and responsibility. Take on the burden of owning what's in your space, and I promise you, you will have access to opportunities and solutions that you wouldn't otherwise have had. So, insight number 3. This is a unique one that I haven't read it in one particular place, and this is a function of being coached and mentored and a lot of reading that I've done. But I've seen it in a lot of great leaders that I've had the benefit of working with and being mentored by. And if you look across the leadership material, you see this in spotted across different books, but I want to bring it together to really say, I think these 3 things go together. So E3, ego, emotions, and empathy. I'd offer to you that when you can master, control, develop these different aspects of yourself, that your leadership journey will become a lot more efficient. And I say efficient, a lot of hurdles you may have may disappear because you've been able to control the self. And these are all personal things that are controlling about yourself. So let me explain what I mean. So empathy. If you can connect with someone, as is your role to do as leaders and with your team, there is a greater chance that they feel trust in you. And it's difficult for people to follow you if they don't trust you. They may follow instructions, but that's a very transactional. I'll do it because it's a repercussion. My heart isn't really in it. I'm not looking to go the extra mile. I'm not thinking for myself. I'm just doing what I'm told. That's a very transactional type of way of being. But when you can connect with people and have empathy, so let them know that you understand the space they're in, what they're feeling, what their challenges are, what their aspirations are. And empathy is not sympathy, just to clarify. Sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Empathy is letting somebody know that you understand the space they're in mentally, emotionally. When you can accomplish that with your team, you will recognize that the trust they place in you is that much greater, because once they know that you understand them, when you come to them with proposals, or when you chart a course, or when you suggest a course of action, what's going to happen is, because they know you understand them, they're going to trust the fact that what you're proposing, you understand how it impacts them, and that you come to them with the best decision you can think of, knowing all the facts. If you don't think you know them, if you don't think you understand them, you may find yourself challenged to chart a course, or to bring a decision, or to say something to them, because in the back of their mind is thinking, well, this person doesn't know me. They don't know what I go through here when they're not here. But they come up with this idea in the office, and I don't even know how it impacts me. And you get that type of feedback, which from their perspective is fair, because if you don't know that you understand them, how can they trust that you consider them in a full way when you make your decisions, or when you chart your course? Ego. Ego is a very debilitating thing to most people, and men specifically, because there's a whole bravado and all that kind of thing, but across both sexes. When your ego is not in check, you block yourself off from hearing people, or people don't even approach you because you're infallible, you're always right, I have to have the final say. All of those things really build a brick wall between you and your team. And you may even be doing it and not recognize it, to be honest with you. So it's something you have to check. You have to be very self-aware about yourself and recognize when your ego is coming up. We all have ego. Don't get me wrong. We all have some level of pride, and we all want to be our best self. So it's not to say we don't all have some type of ego, but it needs to be in check. It needs to be managed and manifest in a way that's not detrimental to your leadership with your team. And I'll give you an example of how ego really comes to play in a way that you may not consider. When we all get feedback, and we all get it, and it's never, I shouldn't say never, but it's often not easy to hear, because we're programmed to think we're right and we're doing the best we can. And when somebody says to us, well, Jared, you didn't quite handle that in a way I would have thought, or when you did that, it kind of hit me in a way that I felt, you're a little uncaring. Or you know what, you just mismanaged that situation. You didn't really handle that well at all. Maybe get quote unquote negative feedback. It's very hard to accept and say, you know what, I messed up. I could have done better. The natural response is typically to figure out all the reasons why I'm right and that person is wrong, because you know what, they didn't know that this person did this, or they didn't know that I had this deadline, or they didn't know that I had delivered this. There's always that natural response. It's human nature, We don't like to think that we're deficient, We all have this model in our mind of ourselves that we are our best selves at all times. So when we get the feedback and we are presented with this image that is incongruent with our own self model of ourselves, it's hard to accept. There's a natural resistance there. But consider the question, are you perfect? And I reckon that the answer to most of you will be no, you're not perfect. So then, if you're not perfect, and we accept that we're all imperfect beings naturally, just by the virtue of being human, why is it that when we get feedback that may not, again, be in line with what we think our version of ourselves is, why is it we're so resistant to it? Are we infallible? Are we untouchable? Are we perfect human beings? No. So imagine the ego that must be manifesting at that point in time when you have those thoughts, because what you're really saying to yourself is, when you get the feedback, is no, I'm perfect. That's not me. You're wrong. You heard it wrong. That's the natural response. So recognize the ego that's at play when we resist hearing the things that may be tough for us to hear. And then I offer you, keep your ego in check and recognize the opportunity to grow when people give you feedback that you may have a blind spot around, because typically that's what happens. You know, we all have this version of ourselves, as I said, but we don't quite know how we land for other people, how we occur in other people's minds. We know how we want to occur, but when we get the feedback, if we can keep our egos in check and recognize that, okay, it's possible that I have a blind spot. It's possible that I may not be carrying over myself the way I think I am. That feedback could be a blessing, because things that you may not know are holding you back from your own personal development and growth, whether it be an organization or personal leadership journey, whatever the case may be. Because you have controlled your ego and you've put that aside or controlled it, you're now open to hearing what allows you to grow, what people are seeing about you that they think you could be better at. So it's a really powerful thing that may go unnoticed often, again, because we're all programmed to think we're right and we're our best selves at all points in time. But recognize that we may not always be, and put the ego aside when you get the feedback. Take it on board. You know, I'm not saying take it wholeheartedly, but consider that, what if? What could I have done differently? What about this could be useful to me if I accept that I'm not a perfect human being? And expectations. Oftentimes, I found, not every single time, but oftentimes when we have people that we consider difficult or problematic, or situations that are challenging or that went the way we wish they hadn't gone, oftentimes what has been lacking is clear expectations. We tend to think that people should know, you know, they should know, they know they're supposed to do this. Why did they not do? They know I wanted this at so and so time, or I wanted it this way. But just pause and check your assumptions. Have you actually said the words, I expect you to do it this way? Or I expect when this happens, this is how you respond? Or I expect that these are the behaviors you will demonstrate in this area? Oftentimes we don't really have expectation conversations. We have conversations when the expectations aren't met, but we don't quite have the upfront work, which is, you know, it's messy, it's, you know, time consuming. It could be considered a little touchy-feely depending on how comfortable you are having those conversations about behaviors and values and those kind of things. But I challenge you that oftentimes when we are concerned, or if we feel let down, or people don't deliver, there's a good chance that there wasn't an expectation that was communicated or communicated clearly. And clearly is the marker there is that a person understands, not that you said it. Because again, people have different lenses, backgrounds, upbringing, so words mean different things to them. So just recognize the power of controlling your ego, having empathy and demonstrating empathy in a really powerful way. And again, not sympathy, not feeling sorry for people, but connecting with people in a way that they feel that you understand them and that you have earned the right to lead them. And set expectations. Don't assume people know. Don't assume that, well, you've been here 5 years, so you must know, or I said this already, so you must know this is how you wanted it. Just abandon that thought. Always strive to set an expectation so that there's no ambiguity and that nothing is left to chance. You know, it's really important. So I reckon that consider your most recent leadership challenge, or the one you may be thinking about coming up, and see if any of those three things might be useful to you. And I'm willing to bet for a good portion of the answer will be yes. And I hope it's yes. I hope that part was really meaningful to you. And for my fourth insight, dignity. And I say dignity in the space of having difficult conversations, which is a task on a function that all of us will have to undertake as leaders. And it's something that I don't think ever gets easy. Certainly not for me. I wouldn't say it's easy, but you do get more comfortable that you're being fair in the moment. And that's something that I've learned to hold on to. Not that it's going to be easy, but I always want to make sure that I'm being fair to the person I'm having a conversation with, and that I'm not bringing them to a space that I break them down or I'm accusing. You know, I want to enter that space with them to solve the problem and to work through the problem with them. Not that I'm standing over here away from you and, you know, throwing darts. And what I found is really useful, and there's a lot of material around difficult conversations and feedback and how do you coach and whatnot. And I'm sure they all are useful. I've read a lot of books about it and they've been very useful to me. But one of the underpinning things that for me, has really helped me enter a space that I'm a lot more comfortable having these conversations is I always revert to whenever I'm going to have a conversation or I'm preparing for one, how do I maintain this person's dignity in this conversation? How do I make sure that they don't feel personally attacked as a human being? How do I create psychological safety for them so that they know, listen, this is going to be a tough conversation. I'm not trying to break you down, but we do need to have this conversation. So I just wanted to let you know it might not be easiest to hear, but I'm doing this because I really want you to develop or grow or get better. How do you create that space for them? And when you keep dignity at the forefront, you will access things that allow you to have that communication in a way that is positive. And if not positive, at least not demoralizing. Because one of the last things we want to do as leaders, because like it or not, we have a power that is perceived that we wield, whether intentionally or not, over people that we are superior to, quote, superior just in terms of levels, not superior as a person. Our words have weight that we don't often recognize is as heavy as it is. So something that you may say very casually, very almost flippantly, not with malintent, when those words are received by our team, what for you was a very casual, by the way, well, it's not your best word, but it's all right. Very casual, probably a factual statement, not the person's best word. What that person often hears is, that was horrible. What did you bring this to me? This? Recognize the weight of our words and recognize that preserving dignity is a very purposeful thing that we have to use our words to create that space. It's not enough to know you don't want to hurt this person or you don't want to demoralize them or degrade them. It's not enough to know that in your head. You have to communicate that in a very purposeful way, in a very specific way. You almost have to build a safe space with your words by communicating the things around how do you enter this difficult conversation, this melee, but exit it in a way that, you know what, that was rough, but I want you to know that I'm not here to attack you, but I see things in you that for your own benefit, we need to change. And I'm here with you in that journey to really improve and get better. So I just wanted to leave that with you as well. So dignity is an important thing. And if nothing else, when you were thinking about how you give your next quote unquote difficult feedback conversation, start with dignity. Keep that in your forefront and recognize you have to communicate it purposefully. And I reckon the conversation will go a little smoother. Not easy, because it's never easy. It's not easy for me. I haven't figured out how to get it easy yet, but a little smoother. Now, those are 4 key things that, again, I benefited from my leadership journey with various Massy execs and other organizations and different, material and just my own experiences, really. But there are a few other things that I wasn't quite sure I was going to get into. So I just have a quick rapid fire 4 or 5 slides I wanted to leave you with to ponder, but I can't go in as much time. So the next one is a mentor makes a world of difference. I cannot tell you the impact my mentors have had on my personal development and my career, and it really is important if you really are striving for that next level of leadership and development, get a mentor. And it doesn't have to be somebody who approaches you. Some of my mentors I've approached and said, I want to get to this point. I find myself struggling with this. Can you help me? Are you willing to take on, speak with me a couple times a week or a month to help me kind of figure this thing out? Get a mentor. I promise you, it will make the world of difference in your development. Have a support system. When you lead, and the higher up you go, the more difficult it is. It can be lonely. It can be lonely being the only person who's up at night worrying about the department, the business, the company. Depending on your circumstances, is the company gonna have enough to survive next year? You have this target that you're supposed to do X and you're off by 20%. you know, there's this decision you need to make, and you know it's going to impact a lot of people, and you're trying your best, but you have to make a decision because it's the best thing for the business and for the team. But you know the short-term ramifications is that it's going to create turmoil. There are not many times you have somebody who can really share that burden with you, and the load can get heavy. I promise you can get heavy. So you really do need to kind of figure out what's your support system. Have courage. It kind of takes back to the last point. Have courage, because there's some decisions you're going to have to make as a leader that may not be easy, but if you accept your responsibility, you recognize it's the right thing to do. So courage is something to keep forefront. Have a value system, because when the decisions come that are difficult, that you're kind of not sure where to go, I found that having a personal value system is something that helps you kind of navigate the darkness. It really is something that can help you in those tough spots. And lastly, leadership is a journey. It's not a place. It's not a point of arrival. You know, there's always something around the bend that is gonna be more difficult than what you've experienced. So recognize that you have to be in that space of constant learning and growth and development. You're not there and you're done. There's always gonna be something to grow and develop in. So it's a journey, and enjoy the journey. It's one of those things that many people don't have the privilege to do, and we've been privileged to be leaders. So enjoy the path. And that's it for me. Are there any questions? Donna, I'll hand back over to you. And thank you for your time.
So Jared, oh my, thank you for being here today and for sharing your journey with such humility. It was well worth the wait. And with that, I want to say, for those of you who can stay on, because of our late start, we will go till about 11:10, and we hope you can stay with us. So I will now hand you over to Susanna Reyes, who will be your moderator for the Q&A. Thank you again, Jared.
Hi, Jared, and good morning, and welcome to our listeners and viewers at large. So the questions we have for you, Jared, at this time, first one being, were you at any time intimidated knowing that you are probably the youngest CEO or VP in Massy Barbados Group?
Not no. But there was a version of myself that was what I would say allowed me to kind of not be intimidated. I remember being at a course, GMW actually, a course that Massy used to put on, or a facilitator used to put on. And I think it was a mid-level manager then, I can't remember his exact role. And the facilitator asked me a question. He was asking us about, you know, recognizing our potential and our future and our possibilities. And at that point in time, I'd only worked in retail. And he asked me, well, would you be the CEO of Roberts someday? I said, no. Roberts, manufacturing, dog food, margarine, chicken, you don't know anything about that. And he asked me about, so you think you can't learn it? So, well, I guess with enough time and training, I could learn it, yeah. So you think you wouldn't get any training? Well, no, I think I'd be supported. I think that, you know, it wouldn't be left to sink or swim. Yeah, I think so why wouldn't you do it? And he sat back and said, well, I don't know. So that exchange was really showed me, you know, the power and of limiting beliefs, because I just believed they couldn't do it. I had no reason to believe they couldn't do it, but I just believed it. So when we had that exchange, and then through, you know, various experiences and recognizing, you know, once I'm open and I don't think I know everything, I go in recognizing that I have to learn. You know, I've learned that with the right support system and the right team and the right access, I believe I can learn most things. Can I be a rocket scientist? Probably not. I'm again back to limited belief. I don't think it can be, but with the right team, I reckon that I could learn anything. So no, I wasn't intimidated, but there was a version of myself years ago that would have been, had I not had that conversation with that facilitator.
Okay, thanks for that. And that's also given us a little insight as to who's Jared's. So this is also a popular question. What is one mistake you witness leaders making more frequently than others?
No, that's a good question. I would, and I'm not sure is one answer, but I guess one mistake I would say is not listening, and more so not allowing your people to know that you are listening is one of the most painful things I believe when people feel they're not being listened to, because, you know, more often than not, people have taken the time to share a view or share a perspective. And as leaders, we're very busy. There's a lot of things happening. There are a lot of demands on our time. There are a lot of deliverables, a lot of deadlines. So it's very, very easy to get caught up in just knocking off what you need to knock off and not being present when people come to you to share concerns or ideas or opportunities or to share with themselves. So when people feel not listened to, you know, you're not going to get, or you often don't get that opportunity again. So then you've lost that person to a certain extent. They shut off and you lose the opportunity to connect with them and then help grow them and build that relationship. So I would say not listening, and equally so not allowing people to know that you are listening, because you can be, but if they don't feel listened to, then it doesn't matter because they don't feel listened to. Your intentions are irrelevant. It's how it lands for them.
Okay, thank you for that. And we have another question. We have quite a bit coming in, so thank you very much to the viewers and listening public. So the other question is, I have received feedback that I am impatient, of which I am in agreement. What can you advise to help develop my patience as a young leader?
So, and I empathize because I've walked that path and I'm still walking that path, because impatience is one of the things that I've had to grow through. I'd say if you have a mentor or a peer that you can connect with, share your struggle with them, share what you're working on, and empower them to check you when you're being impatient. Because one of those things that is an experiential development. It's nothing you can read, at least that I've seen, that you just magically become patient. It's one of those things you have to experience whatever your triggers are, because most of us have triggers that get us from 0 to 100 pretty quickly. That you have to recognize or grow that muscle that allows you to experience the trigger without going to 100 and being impatient or needing it now or not recognizing where people are. So I would say share what you're working on with somebody you trust, with your own leadership development, and empower them to check you when they see you becoming that way. And what you'll find is that when they check you in the moment, because it is very powerful in the moment, you can recognize what you were feeling. How was your breathing? You know, were you tense? Were your shoulders near your ears? Were you balling the fists? Were you scribbling? You know, was your heart rate high? So when you recognize the space you're in physically, mentally, emotionally, when you're impatient, because somebody can kind of tell you, well, you know, you're doing that thing right now, you can start to feel what triggers you and what manifests or how it manifests. So then you can start to kind of take a step back. When you start to feel the heart rate rising, recognize that and control that. Then you take a step back. Well, what made my heart rate rise? Well, when they said it this way, okay, why did they say it that way that made me start to, oh, because I felt, you know, they were saying this about me. So that peer or mentor who can really check you when you're in that space of being impatient, I think will be very powerful to kind of do that feedback loop. And it's really experiential learning. There's no magic bullet that I've seen or experienced that just makes you be patient overnight. It's just experiencing your triggers over and over and building the muscle to kind of separate the trigger and the response, to trigger, pause, and kind of keep yourself in check.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another, it would be interesting to hear how you became comfortable with ownership for everything.
I'm not sure I was ever uncomfortable with it, to be honest, in this instance. I think, and this may be a bit of a personality trait, so I don't know if this is a fair answer, but for me personally, I've always wanted responsibility. And again, back to, I think one of the slides I showed earlier speaks about, you know, your own personal core values. One of my core values for me personally is I want to make a difference. I want to be that person who makes things that I am in control of or I'm responsible for better. That's just something that gives me immense value. Dawn spoke earlier about my prodigal journey and my return. And one of the things that really recognizing my foray into non-Massy work is if I don't feel like I'm making a difference, or if I don't feel like I am contributing to something meaningful, I just check out. I get very disengaged. It's a personal thing. So that desire for me personally to make a difference, I really accept I'm responsible for everything. So that may not answer your question. I'm sorry that if it doesn't give you that access, but for me, that's kind of where I am. Because I accept and I know what drives me and what fulfills me personally is making a difference. Things that I'm responsible for, I immediately want to be involved and to know that I'm being a positive influence on things that I have control over. So sorry if it doesn't give you the answer you're looking for, but that's my reality.
Okay, and we're going to keep those questions coming, Jared. How do you motivate a team to meet the demands given the current COVID restrictions? As a young leader, do you believe that all ages can be motivated through the use of technology?
That's a multi-part question. So no, I don't believe all ages can be motivated through technology. People are different, and it's not just age. Upbringing, socialization, comfort level, education levels. Excuse me. So I think a broad brush approach to motivation and connecting with people, I think, will be problematic because people, just as human beings, are different. So I know there's no one size fits all approach. And in terms of how they motivate a team in this environment, it's really show up every day and connect. So, and there's legwork here. There's no, send a flowery email or do a card or have a virtual Friday night line. There's no one size fits all. It really is about connecting with people so that they know that they're not alone in their particular journeys, because everybody has a different space they're in. COVID and the stressors and the trauma, and in some cases trauma, affects us all differently. So to motivate, my personal belief is that you have to connect with people first, because if they don't believe you understand where they're at, what you can be conveying to them may just be empty words. So my advice there is really connect with your team so that you understand the space that they're in. How is it occurring for them? How is the personal journey for them? How is it at home? Where are they at mentally? And then when you understand them and they know that you understand them, then you can say, well, how do we kind of figure out this next step? How do we achieve this? How do we bring some joy to what we have at work? Because we're at work 8 hours and sometimes more of our life. But the basis there is really connecting with them at an individual level, again, not en masse, at an individual level, so that you understand where they're each at personally, and then build from there.
Right, thank you. And again, reminding persons, we have extended our time, so please stay on if you can. Another question.
Sure.
When your superior does not possess most of the skills as a leader should have, how do you start that conversation with them?
That's an interesting question. I'm not gonna lie, that's gonna be difficult, because the natural feeling for you as the person who needs to have the conversation is the fear of retribution and victimization. That's a natural feeling to have, whether it's true or not, whether it's real or not. There's a natural feeling to have. So my advice there is you have to figure out the personality you're dealing with. Figure out when they're in a space to have a conversation that might be a little difficult for them to hear, because you have to time that conversation is my advice. You wouldn't want to time it in a space that they're not open to hearing. Prepare them for what they're about to hear. And usually I find when you ask a person, can I have a conversation that may not be the easiest to have, but I really want to have it? You remove the shock factor, because when you shock somebody with difficult conversations or feedback, especially a superior, where there's obviously a power dynamic you have to figure out, you run the risk of that going off the rails. So prepare them for the conversation. When I say prepare them, again, enter the space with, can I have a difficult conversation? And it's not easy. I'm not comfortable having it, but I really want to have it. And usually you will find that the person recognizes how difficult it is for you and creates a bit of a safe space for you to have the conversation. And then you share the things that you're seeing, again, respectfully, because with all things, there should be respect, and there is a power dynamic difference out there. Unless you have a relationship that you can have a free conversation in a little more informal way, but then share the things that you're seeing. And what is also useful, and another tidbit, is the values. I mean, you can relate back to the values. So again, honesty, integrity, love and care, growth, continuous improvement, respect. You will find that there's a frame, there's a reference point that you don't have. It's not a, I feel you should be this way or you feel you should be this way. The values speak to this, and for me, and you have to own your words. For me, when you behave this way or when you did that to me, I felt this way and I didn't think it was in keeping with the values. So I'd say prepare them for the conversation and have the ask if it's okay to have a difficult conversation, which may not be easy for them to hear. And then use the values as a reference point, because it removes the possibility of, well, I think this is what it should be like and you think it's what it should be like, versus, well, this is what our values are. And for me, what happened in that instance didn't manifest itself in the way that I thought the value should be. You can have a conversation around that. And again, I'm not pretending it's going to be easy, but if it's important to you, I think that's probably the best way to approach it.
Okay, thank you. Another. How do you motivate team members who seem not to care about progression or development? Some team members seem to be content with just going with the flow. How do you encourage them?
Oh, so back to connecting. If they're open to connecting, so you have to recognize that some people just aren't. But if they are, figure out what is important to them, because usually, I shouldn't say usually, I've found at times there's a history, there's a lot of baggage that may be preventing people from showing up in their best selves. And they haven't let go of the baggage, and you may not even be aware of the baggage. So being in a space and being able to build a rapport with them enough to understand, well, what is important to them and why may what you perceive as disinterest, why is it manifesting that way? So having a direct conversation really, I think, is the most important thing, and not, I would caution about being accusatory. So you wouldn't say they're disinterested because that's how it shows up for you. But asking them, well, I recognize that you don't stay past 4 o'clock, or, then I'm not seeing a lot of gusto when you do this. So, and I'm just trying to figure out, is there something wrong? So speaking to factual things, what you're observing, as opposed to your interpretation of the observation. And that's important, because when you place your perception on the actions, people will often get defensive because it may be something totally different for them. The actions may be the same. You have to leave at 4 o'clock, or yes, may not be energetic, but what's at their core may be something totally different, and you lose the opportunity to understand what that is if you come with a preconceived notion of you are this way because you're doing this. So you can consider that.
Okay, thank you. So what is something you wish someone had told you earlier on, actually, in your leadership role or journey?
I don't know if I would say I haven't been told it before, but I probably didn't embrace it at the time when I was given the information, because it wasn't as meaningful to me then as it is now. But having a support system, again, whether it be a colleague or a peer or a mentor, for those difficult moments, because you always hear leadership is lonely and it can be taxing and tiring, especially when you have the pressure of, large responsibilities. And I've always heard that, and that's not the first time I've heard it, but it really intensifies the more senior you get. And finding a way to build in rejuvenation, rest. You don't appreciate how important those things are until you get to a place where you're almost burnt out and you have other detrimental effects. So I would say I have been told it before, but I didn't take it on board the way I do now. And I probably would have made different health decisions and lifestyle and whatnot early on if I had really appreciated how intense it can be to really scheduling, rejuvenation, and the rest, because I'm a pretty ambitious person. I'm pretty driven. So, you know, especially being, well, quote unquote young now. So you feel you can go through anything without, you know, too much sleep, and, you know, you don't need any rest and da 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 da. But it really intensifies as you get some more senior position, and obviously as you grow older, your body responds differently. You're not a young yam, as the patients would say. So I would say being very purposeful about rejuvenation and support and rest, I would say something I wish I had taken on board more seriously early. Not I wasn't told it, but I didn't really embrace it the way I should have earlier in my career.
And thanks for that. And this is your last question, Jared.
Sure.
How do you influence people who don't agree with your views or are stuck in a certain way of doing things?
Well, it's really about continuous effort. And I start from a position, and I try my best to be very purposeful about this. I don't need us all to agree. And I want to have people in the space that we respect the fact that we can have different positions on certain things. You know, your way doesn't have to be my way, and vice versa. So I want to start with respect for us having different views, is usually what I try to do at first. And then recognizing why, or trying to recognize why do they have a position that I may think is at odds with what I have. And once you can recognize why people hold a ground or hold a position, hold a line, oftentimes, again, not every time, sometimes it really just is what it is. But oftentimes, there's something underpinning that position that isn't what is visible. So there's something beneath the surface that you don't have a problem with at all, but because of not having a deep communication at times, the surface issues are conflicting, but the real issues are really not at odds. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to go out and be very purposeful, not belligerent, but purposeful about trying to understand why people have the positions they have. And I would say take the long route, quote unquote, because it may seem a longer route than just, you know, using your authority and stamping your fist and saying, do it this way, because those type of actions seldom hold up, because when you flex your authority and say this is the way or the highway and da da da, you will find you will get very, very surface level buy-in, very, very surface level. You have to be there for it to happen, and when the time your back is gone, it goes back to the old way, or, you know, people will see, okay, no problem, you want it done this way, they do it. Recognize that you're about to walk off a cliff if you take this course of action, but no problem, the boss wants it this way, you can do it this way, and you walk off the cliff. So spending the time and effort around figuring out why people have the positions they have, because it again, not every single time, but oftentimes there's an underlying reason that's not being surfaced, and you more often not recognize that you may not be as far apart as you are. And again, there's nothing that is a panacea for everything, because there's certain situations like, you know, safety or danger or, you know, risk to people's lives that there's no real ambiguity around. There's no opportunity for differences of opinion when people's lives are in danger. So let me just say at that point, but where there's the opportunity to kind of have the conversation over time, I would take the long road, because people feel respected. They recognize they're interested in their perspective, and you can more often not get to figure out what is the underlying reason that's not surfaced that may not be as opposing as the surface issues tend to be.
Thank you so much, Jared, for that on your insight. At this time, this takes us to the end of the Q&A, so I hand you back over to Ms. Dawn Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you, Jared Wright, for being here today as our young and talented leader. To our audience, I want to thank you very much for being with us today and for staying with us as we continued a little past our regular time. Please look out for our MLI flyers announcing our upcoming paid workshops and, of course, our complimentary webinars. So see you next time, and remember to continue to level up. Bye for now.